Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Giannone, and I welcome you to today's Crust webinar. The topic today is going to be the 3P's of a perfect company. Let's get right down and start. Every day, owners and their teams are trying to grow their companies while managing all the daily situations that arise. Most companies are doing this without a roadmap. For most owners, even for most managers within a company, they find themselves challenged by this juggling act. Every single day, there are things that will come up, and there's nothing we can do about that. That's part of managing and owning a company. Issues will always arise that will require our attention. How can we possibly do that without having a plan for utilization of that time and a structure for how to go about actually growing our company? It's just not going to happen by itself. So we need to develop a roadmap. One of the things we need to make sure we do with that roadmap is we have to narrow the path down as best we can. We can't just drive in every direction at the same time. We have to be going in a direction that we assume, or that to the best of our knowledge we know is taking us on the path to success. So the best way to do that is to narrow down the things that we concentrate on in our company. I spoke about this in a previous webinar, but I went to a very interesting business symposium. It was actually a breakfast meeting, and it was all about structure and organization and scheduling your time. And it was very funny because it was actually held at 7 a.m. in the morning, because they knew that most owners didn't have time in the middle of a day, because once they got to the office, the chaos started. So they had a breakfast symposium, 7 a.m. We were all out of the building by 8 a.m. And that was part of their mission, was to show us that we can do that, and we can have a plan, and we can schedule, and we can get our information out, and we can plan for success in a very fixed period of time. And it was a really, really interesting symposium. The most interesting aspect was they said no matter what business you're in and no matter what role you have, 80% of your day will be spent handling issues and problems. So they were saying we can't schedule out 100% of our day, because we always have to be accessible for those issues and problems. What we can do, though, is we can make sure that that other 20% is highly scheduled, highly structured, but also very simple. If we try to do too much, we're going to get nothing done. So it was a very, very eye-opening little tidbit, and I've used it in this roadmap to apply it to a very simple concept. Now, I'm not going to take credit for the concept. This concept of the 3Ps came from a gentleman called Marcus Lemonis. If any of you have watched the show The Prophet on CNBC, this is a guy who is a very successful CEO and entrepreneur. He ran a few companies, a car dealership company, and then he got involved with the RV industry, and he became the CEO of Camping World. And over the course of about 15 years, he greatly expanded that company and grew it to monumental proportions, to the point where it went public several years ago on the New York Stock Exchange, and he became an extremely wealthy man, and the company's worth billions of dollars today. Well, he now has this TV show, The Prophet, where he goes out and he invests his own money into small businesses. And the thing that he does with all of these businesses is he applies his rule of the 3Ps that he used within Camping World in order to make these companies more profitable and more successful. Now, again, it's a TV show, so there is a lot of shtick involved, and everything seems to be a little over dramatic, but the reality is he actually does invest into these companies. You can do research from the show. The show's been on for several seasons, so you can actually research online and take a look at some of the firms that he has invested in. Many of them have fallen under his investment umbrella now and are part of a larger organization that he's got. And he does stay with these companies. And many times his initial investment might be 300,000 or 600,000. And many times that investment ends up becoming much, much larger as he gets more entrenched within the company. So he is legitimate. It is a really true representation of something that's going on. It's not just a made-for-TV shtick, so to speak. But he does use the 3Ps, and I've been a big fan of the show because I love the concept of the 3Ps. So why don't we just dive in, start talking about these 3Ps in your industry and in your business specifically. The first P is the people, your staff, your workers. They are the backbone of everything that we do as a company each and every day. It doesn't matter where they're working within your company. Every single member of your team, hopefully, is a very important part of that machine. We have to have strong teams in every area of our business to be successful. Obviously, we're a cleaning and restoration business. We need to have really, really strong people on the production side. They are the face of the company to the clients. They are the people who produce the work. We need to make sure that they're strong, but we also need really strong marketers. The marketers are the people who are trying to get your reputation and your name out there. We need to make sure that those people are very strong and very good messengers of what you are and what you are about as a company. Obviously, your administrative teams, anybody in your office needs to be very strong. The message needs to be really clear for them as well. Properly building your employees into assets is the key to long-term growth. We have to make sure that your employees don't feel like they're just guys getting a check and that they're expendable parts. That's a really tough juggling act for most of us. So we have to make sure that they understand that they are assets, because we can't grow a company without assets. We can grow a company without long-term employees, but we still need to make sure that even if a guy says he's only going to be with you for a couple of years, he feels valued and he brings value to the equation. Finally, making them work together regardless of their daily tasks is the difference between a good company and a great company. If your marketers are not talking to your production teams, if your office staff is not talking to your marketing teams, if there's not communication between all different parts of your business, if your mitigation side is not talking to your contents or your repair side, you're never going to have a great company. So that's a really big part of your people side of your business. You have to make sure that within the structure, within the personnel, there are communication lines. Let's get to that. Let's talk about the 4 keys to success on the people side of your business: hiring, training, retaining, and compensating. The most important ings you're going to find. Let's start with hiring. Many of us have the attitude that we're not going to hire until we absolutely need. And that's all well and good. Many of us are very sensitive to the amount of money that we have to spend. We want to keep our costs as low as possible. We're not in an industry where we're getting a steady flow of business all the time. We don't have guaranteed contracts, so to speak, that are giving us a guaranteed minimum. We have to hustle for every penny we make every month. So keeping our expenses to a bare bones minimum absolutely makes sense. What is important, though, is to also understand that when you're hiring, if we do hire based on we absolutely need somebody today, we're kind of cornering ourselves into a box where we have to hire someone with experience, or if we don't, we're really taking our chances putting them right out there. So maybe we should start thinking, as we can be a little more stable in our businesses and as our growth lends itself to having a little more free cash, maybe we could start thinking of a different hiring model. The hiring model I would prefer is hire attitude. Always hire someone that has a great attitude and wants to come to work. Let's face it, guys, we're not an industry where there's a hell of a lot of training that people get outside of our industry that they bring in. Most of the things that people need to be trained for within our industry, especially with our technicians, involve stuff that they're only going to learn once they are here. I don't know many guys who are out there who are not in the restoration industry who are going and getting their WRTs and ASDs. That's just not happening. So let's understand, when it comes to hiring, if we hire attitude as opposed to experience, sometimes we don't absorb people's bad habits. Sometimes we're able to take people who have a good habit of having a good attitude, which can't really be trained. And then we can move on to the second T, which is the training. We have to commit to training our crews. It's not enough to say, well, I needed a guy, I hired him on a Friday, he started on a Monday, I put him right on a truck, and he's been out there for 3-4 months, and I guess he's doing okay. We all know that that's a recipe for disaster. If we've all done that, which I'm pretty sure most of us have, we have to understand that if it didn't turn into a bad thing, we've pretty much dodged a bullet so far. It's going to be bad in the end. We have to keep ourselves aligned towards understanding that we need to bring people in and we need to train them. We need to train them to our way of doing things. Once we've got them hired and once we've got them trained, our next biggest risk is losing them. So we need to work on plans for retaining them. We need to make sure that the environment that they're working in is a two-way street. Obviously, as an owner or as a manager of your company, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your workers. You want to maximize their potential. You want to maximize their productivity. And even if they're an office person, you want to make sure that they're giving you a full week's worth of work. That's really important. But the two-way street has obviously your direction and their direction. You have to make sure that whatever it is that that employee or that worker or that teammate needs, that you're able to provide that for them so that they stay. The main reason that most people leave their job is not because of pay. And we're going to get to compensation. But the main reason most people leave their jobs is not because of pay. The main reason they leave is because they don't feel like they are valued. I've spoken many times on different webinars about how we can go about valuing our employees, different compensation type plans, different attitudes, but it's basically the structure within your company that provides them with the mechanism to see that they're valued. Whether you recognize them publicly within the company, whether it's a little pat on the back, things that we've discussed before. If anybody wants to, they can go back and look at the past couple of webinars that I've given. A lot of them are about employee retention and about creating good environments in the workforce. But retaining them is really important because the process of hiring and training somebody is a costly process for a company. It could cost you up to $20,000 to go through the process of onboarding a new employee. For some technicians or for some staff, that could be half a year's salary. That's a big investment into somebody. You certainly don't want to have turnover. You want to make sure you can compensate them properly. So that's our next topic, compensation. Let's make sure that the money's fair on both sides again. We always think this is a one-way street. As an owner, it's a take it or leave it approach. As an owner, you're bearing all the risks, so you should get the reward. All of that makes sense. But let's also understand there is value that has to be found in having stable workforces. So fair and proper compensation will keep them happy, will keep them engaged, and will keep them with you. That has to be a good balancing act. If any of you need help with that, please reach out to me because I've been helping several different members along the last year in developing fair two-way street compensation packages that I think are win-wins. Let's move on to the next P. We had our people, now we have our product. Our product in our industry is the work we do out in the field. That's our end product. If you're a restoration company, the extraction, the demo, the cleaning, the drying, that is our product. In the end, no matter how great we run our office and no matter how great we market our services, at the end of the day, we're always going to be judged by how well we do the work out in the field. We have to perfect the quality of our services or we can't ever expect to grow. There are many of us who have tried to go down the road of just going and getting more business. And we do that and we say, well, when the business comes, we'll just add more teams. Guys, if you've done that, I can pretty much assure you that it didn't work out well for you. I know a couple of the teams that I've been coaching over the last couple of years, it's been a real struggle for the team members to understand that we need to grow the team and the product to a point where we could then go out and get more of it. We always say, if you build it, they will come. But in our case, that's really true. If you design a superior product, and if you're able to offer a superior product, that becomes a huge marketing advantage for you. That begets more work. Just going out and grabbing more work without being able to do it as perfectly as possible does not help anybody. It certainly will hurt you in the long run. Your crews need to perform at their best on every single project. If you're working with 2 crews and you've got enough work for 3, just know that none of your projects are being done to a perfection level that you should find acceptable because they just don't have enough hours in the day. They're being pushed and driven. Try your very best to match the capabilities and the expectations of your crews with the realities of the work you're giving them. To demand perfection, you have to allow them the time and effort to give you perfection. It also goes back to one of the things we talked about before. You have to train them to your way of doing things. If they're brand new, they know nothing. If they came from another company, there's a good chance they know bad lessons. You have to train them to your way of doing things. They have to perform their best. Finally, their entire focus has to be on giving the customer more than they expect. This is actually a little catchphrase that Tony Robbins uses every once in a while in some of his business coaching seminars and classes that he teaches. Give the customer more than they expect. If you can do that consistently, then you're going to be always having expectations exceeded. You're always going to be successful. Remember, if it's not great out there in the field, it can't even be good in your pocket. You might make short-term money, but if you're in this industry and this business to make short-term money, there are a lot of other places that I would recommend to be that you can do much better than here. You have to have a commitment to long-term success, and that commitment has to be something that you're willing to invest in. So you're not going to be able to make money as an owner, and you're not going to be able to drive your company as a manager unless you're willing to make the commitment to having a superior product. So just understand your people and your product are the 2 great things that drive you. Here's the third thing. The third P is process. How we operate our business, how we go about doing things, the means by which we train. What are we training our staff to do? We're training them on the process. And every single part of our business has to have a process. We have to create a step-by-step approach to everything we do. We'll start at the top with marketing. Our marketing representatives need to have an incredibly in-depth process to how they operate. They need to have their entire week scheduled. They need to have routes planned out for them. They should have a balance between existing clients that they're visiting and new clients that they're cold calling or that they're warm calling. They need to have a routine that includes using all different types of social media to engage. They might be doing email blasts. They might be creating weekly emails. They might be creating all sorts of different marketing mechanisms. They might be doing Maven articles that Dick refers to all the time. And Dick's obviously much more adept at talking about this than I am, but there is a process to your marketer and your marketing team that should be laid out step by step and should be followed. Obviously, in operations and production, everything that's done out in the field should be done by a step-by-step process. It should be clearly laid out. Your office, all your office staff should have assignments and tasks and KPIs, key performance indicators, ways that we can tell them how to take care of what they're doing. All of these words that are on this little word blast are going to be things that you have to be focusing on. You have to have a process. You have to have a flow chart. You have to have activities, tasks, methods, and goals for every single part of your business. In a business process management model, all of these pieces need to be part of what you're doing. You have to have attention to detail because at the end of the day, when you go to Mr. Smith's home to extract water clean and dry, that process should be very, very close to what you do in Mrs. Jones' home. That process should look the same, should feel the same, because that's the only way you can get towards perfection. You have to have an attention to detail. So you have to have consistency You have to have brand protection, meaning the message has to be the same and it always has to be about the quality. You have to reduce your risk. You have to manage costs. You have to simplify operations, but you have to improve quality and predictability. Those are all things that apply to every business, but they really, really mean a lot to our business here in restoration. It's really, really difficult to get a call, to have to act on an emergency basis, but to do things step by step by step. It's very tough to be a fireman with a plan, but firemen don't go out and just do it as they see it. They go out after hours and weeks and months of training, and everything they do is according to a process and a protocol based on what they observe. We need to treat our businesses the same way. We need to train, train, train. And when it comes time to act, we have to have a process in place that addresses all of those issues and makes it a very simple step-by-step solution. 3 things are going to help you in your process. You have to have communication, you have to have understanding, and you have to have accountability. The communication has to exist to an overabundance, and it has to exist between your company and your client, between your company and your lead sources, and between the individuals within your company itself. Very, very important. Your marketers should be able to communicate what's happening in the process back to their lead sources. They also should be able to communicate with the people on your own teams. They should be able to talk to the PMs and the crew chiefs to make sure things are going well. They should have an understanding of that process that's going on out in the field. Dick and I talk about this all the time. We think it's a very valuable asset to your company if your marketers have some field experience where they at least get to go and do ride-alongs with your PMs and your staffs. Maybe they throw on the high boots and some PPE, and they go out and they help demo and extract a couple of times. Having an understanding of that process is going to give them a much clearer ability to communicate those steps to their lead sources and possibly to the client themselves. Those are very, very key. Having each person in the process communicate with each other. Understanding each other's roles is very important as well. This not only helps in their own individual process, but it helps the company to create a more cohesive unit. If everybody understands what the roles of the other people are, we tend to find ourselves having less jealousy, having less questioning, and having less infighting within our teams. You know, we talk about this all the time, and this is a very, very true but sobering thought. You know, a lot of times our marketers are out there and they don't spend a lot of time in the office or in the field. And those of us in the office and in the field don't really understand what's going on. That lack of understanding creates thoughts within people's heads that really are damaging to our process. And if you don't realize this as an owner or a manager, it's probably something you want to put your finger on the pulse of. There are probably some ill feelings between your crew chiefs and your PMs, because your PMs get to a job, they go out and they sign it, they set a scope, and maybe they're leaving and they're leaving the work to be done by the quote unquote grunts. Let's make sure that that relationship is a solid relationship. Let's make sure the relationship between your marketers and your production teams is solid as well. Like I said before, the marketers aren't always around, so we don't want the people doing the work to think that they have no value. We want them to understand that there's a great value provided by those marketers. They are the face of the company before we get a job. The crew teams are the face of the company when we get the job. And let's also make sure that there's good understanding and communication between the people in the office and everybody else. Once again, the people in the office, because they spend a lot more time with management and possibly the owners, they feel like they have a leg up on things and they don't really understand a lot of what's going on out in the field. That tends to make them very judgmental, because when they have the ear of the owner, they can kind of put things into the owner's head that may or may not be true. So let's make sure that there's good communication and understanding about what's going on. The last thing you need is infighting or false information going around. The final piece that we want to talk about with the process is every process needs to have accountability. If you're setting somebody out on a road for success and you're giving them a process to follow, but you're not holding them to that process, or you're not having any ways to judge their success or failure in following the process, then the process itself is meaningless. We need to set up, I said it before, KPIs, key performance indicators. There are different ways to do this. There are metrics we can force people to follow. We can set goals. We can set dollar goals. We can set job goals. We could set lead goals, things like that. I think meetings is the first place we need to start. If we're not having regular meetings with every different part of our company, we're failing ourselves. We're not holding the process accountable. We need to make sure that we meet regularly with our teams, all the way down to the last person. There's many companies that I'll go into and I'll find out that some of the best ideas for how to improve things that are going on either out in the field or in the office are coming from the newest employees, or coming from the ones with quote unquote the least experience. It's just sometimes a fresh set of eyes. Maybe they did come from another company where, believe it or not, that company did have a good idea. I know we all like to think we're doing everything perfect and we're doing everything the best, but it is possible that there are others out there who may be able to give us one or two really good ideas. Let's not keep ourselves closed to the fact that that might exist, and it actually might exist from somebody we don't expect it from. So meet regularly with your teams. But it's also important to meet regularly with your teams because you need to find out when the process has failed. And if the process does fail, or when it does fail, we need to do what we call a post-mortem. We need to look at the process. We need to find out where the failure existed in that particular job, and we need to make sure we coach to that failure. Guys, I know I've said this before. I'm really into sports. I've coached basically my whole life. Over 35 years, I've coached between sports coaching and coaching in business, and being an educator and being a teacher. I've never been a teacher in a classroom, but that's probably the only place I've never taught. Even when I worked on Wall Street for 15 years, I was responsible for the education of all new members who came into the exchange. I was responsible for making sure that they knew the rules and the protocols and the procedures. So I've always spent my life imparting wisdom and trying to coach. Well, in sports, you do very little coaching during a game. I know that sounds foreign to a lot of people who have not been heavily involved in sports, but we do very, very little coaching during a game. What we do is after the game, we go back, and in the next practice, we go over all the things and all the mistakes that were made in that game, and we try to correct them so that they don't happen the next time. We try to make the process better. Because coaching a sports team is really just about instilling a bunch of processes. If you say, oh, we're going to call a play in football, the play itself is just a process where 11 guys have to do their job. And that's really how you have to look at it. Your business is no different than that. Your business is a whole bunch of people having to do their job to the best of their ability. And if they can do that, the process is perfect. If the process itself isn't perfect, we discover that through these postmortems. Guys might say, listen, you want us to fill out paperwork on this particular type of job, but we can't do that. This is what we need. Or, hey, why don't we automate this? Why can't we get the signatures from the homeowners on digital documents as opposed to paper documents? Then we don't have to worry about scanning. Those are the kinds of things that really can help us out. But we can only do that if we have that accountability. We have to have those regular meetings. Obviously, there's an incredible amount of software out here in our industry that can help us as well. If you're not currently using a good restoration CRM software, I recommend you looking into it. But it's something that it's only as good as the information that it's provided. The expression is garbage in, garbage out. The more information you can get into the CRM and the more people you can get using the CRM, the better tool it is for accountability. For those of you who use Dash or Restoration Manager, you could obviously set all your different thresholds for expectations of when people are going to perform their specific tasks in a given job. Those are very important. But remember, if you don't have somebody watching over those accountability tasks, then they're going to be undone and nobody is going to be following up with the person responsible. So you might have somebody who 2 days ago was supposed to have the invoice finished and it wasn't finished. How do we know that if somebody's not looking at it on a regular basis? So that all goes to your accountability. If you can be communicative, understanding, and accountable within your company, that creates consistency within the process. So what is a successful process? There's 4 steps to getting a successful process. It has to be well-defined. You have to be clear in what you expect. You can't just say, show up at the client's house. You have to lay out. Show up at the client's house, don't park in the driveway, make sure your clothes are neat and clean, go to the door, ring the doorbell, step back away from the door, do not enter until you're asked to go in. Those are the things about a well-defined process. Easy to follow. Don't make them so difficult that only 1 or 2 people in your company can do it. Make sure that if the process for the technicians is laid out, that everybody who's a technician can do their job, and follow the process. Once again, accountable and measurable. You can't say, I expect you to do more than last year. That's not good enough. You have to be able to set an expectation. I want you to increase your marketing efforts by 20%. I want to see 20% more leads than last year. That's measurable and not dependent on any one person. This is a really, really important task. You have to make sure you design the position around the process, not the person. I've been at too many companies where the company is so dependent on one really strong individual that when it came time to design a process, the owners didn't care about what the goal of the process was. All they wanted to do was make sure that Charlie was taken care of. And, I don't want the process to include those 2 steps because Charlie's not good at calling the clients. Well, if we design a process around our people, now the process is not independent of the people. The process is the person. We have to make sure the process, the product, and the people all remain separate parts to our company. They all have to intermesh, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But you have to make sure you're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole like in the visual. You want to design that position around the process. So if you've got a marketer, you don't want to look at the process for that marketer and say, well, I don't think Joe can do that, and I think Joe would get upset if I ask him to do it, so I'm not going to ask him to do it. Guys, let's have more faith in our people. Let's design the process around making sure that the steps are perfect. The position in that process are going to follow those steps. The person filling that position should be able to fulfill that role. That's really a difficult thing for most of us right now, but we have to understand that when we're doing that, we have to make sure that our process is not dependent on any one person. So to recap, our 3 P's, we have people, we have product, and we have process. How do they interrelate with each other? Let's go over that. We'll spend a few minutes talking about the interrelation. Our people provide the product to the client, working within a process. So that's how the people part of our company meshes in. And as you can see, we have 3 different parts, all intertwining with each other and all meshing. That arrow on the right, hopefully, is our company exposure, our company image, and hopefully the direction our company is going forward. So the people provide the product to the client, working within a process that is set up within the company. Okay? This is the interrelation. The product is the result of your people working within a process. If you don't have good people working a very solid process to the best of their abilities, you can't maximize your product. So you can see how that interrelation works. And the process itself is the guide for the people to provide a superior product. There is no one that's more important than the other. The people, the product, and the process are all interrelated. I want to talk a little bit about this as it relates to Marcus Lemonis. We talked about him before. Does he have a preference over which of the 3 he would like to concentrate on? He really doesn't. He says that in order to be a successful company, you need all 3. When he goes into most companies, I'm going to give you a little pop quiz here. When he goes into most companies, where do you think he finds the weakness? Yeah, I'm sure 90% of you, based on your own experience, you probably say that your process is your weak link. And yeah, in most of the companies he goes into, he finds really hardworking people with great attitudes who are just not doing their best because they don't have a good process to follow. In spite of not having a good process to follow, he might find that they have a very good product. But let's just take the case of a bakery. He's invested in a bakery, and he went in there and he said he found great people. He found great skilled bakers. He found really good workers who were able to take their skills and create a really good product. You know, he said some of the best food he's ever eaten came from some of these companies that he's invested in. The problem is they were little mom and pop shops and they didn't have a large scope or exposure because their process was not ironed out. They didn't have a good marketing process. They didn't have a good sales process, and they certainly didn't have a good production process. So he goes in, and most of the times when he's in working on these smaller companies, he's doing it with mom and pops. He doesn't obviously go into chains because there's a lot of restrictions there. So he goes into mom and pops, and he goes into not service providers. He goes into actual product driven companies, retail type companies that either have food, clothing, that type of a service or product. I've rarely, if ever, seen him invest in service companies themselves. So don't expect to be calling Marcus or have him knock on your door saying he wants to invest in your company, but it doesn't mean that the same steps can't be taken in our industry. So let's make sure we focus on the people. Let's focus on the product. But more important than anything else, we have to make sure that we're willing and able to put a process in place. That is the weak link for most of us. With a good process, people and product can become great. With a great process, people, product can become a perfect company. That's really the underlier of all. It's why I put process last, because it really is the most important piece of the puzzle. I don't want to say the others are not important. You have to have all three to strive towards that perfection in your company. And you know, there's a fourth P that is the derivative of the 3 Ps. If you have great people, a great product, and a great process, you're going to have a great profit. For most owners, that's the only P that really matters, the profit. And I'm not knocking anybody. You do need to have profit in order to stay in business. None of us are doing this as a charity. None of us want to have the exposure, the risk, the employees, and the burdens if we're not making a profit. But the only way to make the profit is to have these 3 pieces. You need really good people, you need a great product, and you need to have a process that allows all of those pieces to work. The process is the guide for the people to provide a superior product. Think about your companies for a second. Make sure that you're being very honest about what your companies can provide. You need to trust the 3 Ps. You have to hire, train, support, and compensate the right people. You have to be willing to provide a superior product, and you have to follow a great process. Ask yourself this question: are you right now fully willing and committed to accepting the fact that you might not have the right people? You might not be providing a superior product to your competitors, and you might not be following a great process. That's a very tough question. It's not something that owners look at all the time. It's not something we want to do. We don't really want to take a harsh look in the mirror and have that understanding that, yeah, we have weaknesses within our company. You know, so many people who have issues with their lives, when they finally look for help, they're always told, well, the first step is admitting you need help. And I'm not saying that any of our companies or any of our Crest members are in that position. Clearly, by being a Crest member, You've already taken the step of understanding that there are things you might not be great at, or there might be things that you do not know, and you're reaching out for a little bit of help. That's a great first step. But we have to really want, if we really want success, true success, and strive to perfection, we have to be willing to say to ourselves, am I doing everything right? And guys, this doesn't apply just to us. You guys can absolutely, as an owner, you can hand this down and you can take these same steps and hand them down to your employees. You could ask them to do a little self-analysis. Are they the best person they can be? Are they performing their job functions to the best possible way they can? Are they providing the best possible product to their connections and their boss? And are they following their process 100%? Believe it or not, that's one of the things Marcus does. He calls people out on making sure that they own their part of these 3Ps. And you get that buy-in from every single person in the company. And then as a company itself, you commit to improving each of those 3 areas. There's no telling where you guys can end up. That's really the home run. That's when the crown gets put on your head. When you can absolutely get the buy-in from everyone, and you could then do the analysis on your own and make sure that you're providing everybody in your company with the tools to make it work. That's the process. Remember, the people provide the product by following a great process. The product is the result of great people following a great process. So obviously the process is the drive. Let's work ourselves towards becoming a more perfect company. It can start today. These are simple steps. These are not, I have to redo my whole company. These are simple steps of accountability. Self-accountability and self-awareness can take us really far, and it can absolutely start today. Guys, I want to thank you so much for everything that you've done and for all the attention and all the praise and good words that you've given to us this past year here at the Crest Network. On behalf of Dick Wagner, Scott Tarpley, and everyone else involved here with the Crest Network, I really want to thank you for your time, for your efforts, and we look forward to many, many more visits with you. This is Bill Giannone, thanking you again. Have yourself a very, very happy holiday and a very safe and happy new year. And we look forward to seeing you again down the road. Have a great day. Bye-bye.